Today, we're taking you deep into a war. It's a quiet one, but it's happening all across America.
It's this critical, really messy struggle. It's not fought with, bullets or anything like that, but with hatchets, with herbicide, and just sheer physical grit.
Right. Our mission today is to unpack this fight against invasive species. We're going to be focusing on the young crews who are out there on the front lines.
And the tactics they use, which are surprisingly sophisticated, right? They're fighting these, I guess you could call them botanical supervillains.
Exactly. And we'll also dig into the really stark socioeconomic challenges that honestly threaten to derail the whole effort. We were going deep into the secret life of the plant killers.
So our main source for this drops us right into the middle of the action. We're in Pisgah National Forest. It's in the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, which are just beautiful, but also increasingly under threat.
And there's one primary target they're after. One of the most notorious, most difficult enemies in this entire ecological war. The Tree of Heaven, or Ailanthus altissima.
The way the source material describes hunting this thing, it's so vivid. You first know you're close by the smell.
Yeah, this really distinctive, almost creamy peanut butter smell. It just kind of wafts through the air.
Which is so strange, isn't it? Such a pleasant, weirdly specific smell for something that's supposed to be such a menace.
It's completely incongruous, and visually it's not that scary either. I mean, to the average person, it just looks like a nice tree.
Right. Tall, straight-trunked. The source says it's silvery and sort of nubbled, like a cantaloupe rind. And then it's got this big crown of papery pink seeds.
But that's the thing. Appearances are so deceiving. To an ecologist, this tree is a genuine existential threat to the whole native forest.
And here's the core problem. The reason it's so hard to deal with, you can't just go up and cut it down with a chainsaw.
Absolutely not. Under no circumstance.
Why? I mean, what happens? It's a tree. Why can't you just fell it?
Because the Tree of Heaven is, for all intents and purposes, a Hydra.
A Hydra, like the mythical monster.
Exactly. Any direct assault, like chopping the main trunk, sends this immediate shockwave through the whole system. The tree instantly seals off the wound where you cut it.
Why?
And then it launches this massive counter-assault. It activates this entire root system, which is huge, and spreads way out underground.
So instead of a dead tree, you get what?
You get a horde.
Yeah.
A whole horde of new, incredibly tough shoots that just erupt from those roots. So where you had one tree, you suddenly have a whole grove of clones spreading out, sometimes 25 feet in every direction.
Wow. So you've just made your problem, what, 10, 20 times worse?
Exponentially worse.
Yeah.
It's a guaranteed loss for the person with the chainsaw. And its damage goes way beyond just, taking up space. It's an incredibly aggressive competitor.
It grows super fast, right? Steals all the sunlight from the slower native trees.
It does. But the really sinister part is what happens when its leaves fall. Ailanthus engages in something called Allelopathy.
Allelopathy? That's chemical warfare, basically.
Precisely. Its leaves are toxic.
Yeah.
When they fall and decompose, they leach these chemicals into the soil that actively stop native plant seeds from sprouting.
So it's not just outcompeting them, it's poisoning the ground so its own kids have, like, a guaranteed monopoly.
It's creating its own sterile kingdom. And if that wasn't enough, there's another huge problem. It's a primary host for another major invasive species.
The spotted lanternfly. I've been hearing so much about them.
It's their #1 preferred host for reproduction. So if you want to control the lanternfly, which is this huge agricultural pest, you have to control the Tree of Heaven. They are completely intertwined.
So you've got this fast-growing, soil-poisoning, pest-hosting Hydra, which brings us back to that central question from the people on the ground.
How do you kill a tree that fights back this hard?
Exactly. How on earth do you do it?
The trick, and one of the tree members, Tristan Kersenbrock, put it perfectly, is you have to attack it without alarming it.
Without alarming it.
The whole process has to be so slow, so surgical, that the tree doesn't even realize it's under a life-threatening attack. That's the only way to stop that root shoot response.
That one phrase just changes everything. It's not logging anymore. It's conservation espionage.
It really is. Which brings us to the crews themselves. These are the frontline soldiers in this war. They're young AmeriCorps members, mostly in their early to mid-20s, working for an organization called the American Conservation Experience, or ACE.
And you get this great picture of them. They're all in identical gear, right? Long pants, long sleeves, hard hats, all with the ACE logo. But they all find ways to make it their own.
The little human touches, yeah. You've got Tristan, who's described as being almost meticulously tidy. Everything's tucked in. keys on a carabiner.
And then there's Eva Tillett, who's holding her pants up with a tattered old rope for a belt. A totally different vibe.
And Lucas Durham, who's figured out how to thread his earbuds under his helmet so he can listen to music while he's working. These little things are how you get through that kind of intense physical labor.
Okay, so let's get into the main technique, this stealth assassination method they use. It's called hack and squirt.
It's the definition of calculated damage. The goal is maximum internal harm with minimum external signs.
So how does it work?
The crew uses a really sharp hatchet, and they make about 10 shallow cuts or hacks into the trunk.
But shallow is the key word here.
It is. Just deep enough to break through the outer bark and get to the vascular system, but minor enough that hopefully the tree doesn't register it as a major threat. So no Hydra mode.
And then comes the squirt part. This is where the poison comes in.
Right. They use these squirt bottles filled with this bright blue liquid, which the source hilariously calls alien blood.
And that's the herbicide, triclopyr.
That's it. They squirt it directly into those fresh wounds. And this is where the science gets really cool, really clever.
Because it's applied right into the wound, it bypasses all the tree's external defenses. It just goes straight into the bloodstream, so to speak.
Straight into the vascular system. The tree is effectively using its own circulatory system to kill itself.
But what's the actual mechanism? I know you said it mimics a growth hormone, but what does that mean for the tree? How does it actually die?
It's a chemical Trojan horse. The tree thinks this stuff is a phytohormone, one of its own growth regulators, so it actively transports the poison.
Down to the roots.
All the way down the phloem layer, which is the tissue that carries sugars and nutrients. The entire time, the tree is doing all the heavy lifting, completely oblivious.
That's just an incredible reversal.
And once that triclopyr gets into the roots, it forces the cells to just start growing wildly, uncontrollably. Cell division goes haywire.
So the tree's own tissues just divide themselves to death.
Exactly. The source calls it a fatal self-inflicted cancer. It's a horrifyingly effective way to describe it.
And it's not a quick death, is it?
No, and that's part of the stealth. It's slow. It can take weeks, sometimes months, for the tree to finally die. But the important thing is that the poison has already infiltrated and killed the entire root system. That's the only way to stop the clones from erupting.
So that's how they handle the big ones. But then you have all the saplings, all the smaller ones. That might be a different approach.
It is. The saplings are too young. Their bark isn't thick enough for the notching. So for them, they switch to a scraping technique.
So they just use the hatchet blade to shave off a little bit of the outer stem?
Yeah, just to expose the green tissue underneath.
Yeah.
And then they just dab the chemical right onto that scrape. The source compares it to putting antiseptic on a skin knee.
It's so precise.
Yeah.
So targeted.
It has to be. You want to minimize any collateral damage, any runoff. That's just good conservation practice.
And you get this perfect example of how tough these things are. The source mentions Tristan finding a sapling that a previous crew had already tried to kill.
Right, it had been cut down to these little stumps, but it was already erupting with this whole new bundle of shoots, just refusing to die.
So it needs a follow-up treatment. It's just never a one-and-done deal, is it?
Almost never. Their tenacity is what makes them invasive. But, you know, we have to talk about a totally different kind of enemy now, one that requires a much more grueling hands-on fight. We have to talk about the strangler vines.
Oh, man. The vine that ate the South. You're talking about kudzu?
I am.
Yeah.
And all the hype, all the stories you hear about its growth rate, they're all true.
It can grow a foot a day. Is that real?
A full foot a day during peak season.
Yeah.
It's staggering. And the visual descriptions of what it does to the landscape are just surreal.
Yeah, you hear about roadsides just being digested, swallowed by this green kudzu textured world. Not just the ground, but tree-shaped kudzu, telephone wire-shaped kudzu.
Even old barns becoming these kudzu monuments. It gives you this feeling that the wilderness is just moving in on us at this impossible speed.
There's that great quote from Ron Bethea, the ACE project manager.
Oh, it's perfect. He says, if you leave for 6 months, your car belongs to the wilderness. It's not your car anymore.
That just captures it perfectly, the sheer pace of the takeover.
It does. And kudzu and other vines like Oriental bittersweet, they're not just competing, they're actively murdering the native trees. They're serial stranglers.
So how do they do that? I know they cover the canopy and block the sun.
That's part one. But the second method is much more direct, much more violent. It's called girdling.
Let's get into that. When you say girdling, what's actually happening to the tree's structure?
They wrap around the host tree so tightly it's like a botanical tourniquet. They're squeezing the sapwood, specifically the inner bark layers, the phloem.
The phloem, that's the layer that carries the food, right? The sugars from the leaves down to the roots.
Exactly. So if you squeeze the phloem, you cut off the food supply line, the roots can't get fed. It hinders the travel of water and nutrients, and you're effectively starving the host tree to death from the inside.
Even if it is getting a little bit of sun.
Even then, it's an incredibly efficient botanical superpower. And the experts point out, this is a good tip for anyone listening, our native vines just don't do this. They don't girdle trees just for fun.
So if you see a vine strangling a tree like that, it's a huge red flag.
It's a hallmark of an invasive strangler. But you can't really hack and squirt a jungle of vines, so the removal process is it's grueling manual labor.
What are they using?
Hand tools, thick gloves, folding saws, heavy-duty loppers, and those little squeeze bottles with spongy tips for dabbing herbicide on the cut stems.
And the work itself is just a massive, frustrating, untangling job.
It is. You're painstakingly unwinding these vines from the trees, which leaves these big, ragged scars in the native bark. It's like you're freeing hostages.
They actually call them freed hostages.
They do. As these native trees, these white ash and cottonwoods, slowly emerge from under this suffocating blanket, that's what they call them. The whole job is like trying to untangle a giant fragile knot.
And you get these moments of, I guess, shared absurdity out there. The source mentions a botanical version of the spaghetti scene from Lady and the Tramp.
Yes. It's fantastic. A crew member is pulling on this massive kudzu stem, following it up and over trees and logs, completely engrossed.
And then what?
He realizes his crewmate on the other side of the thicket is pulling on the exact same route from the other direction. They're in this massive tug-of-war with the same vine.
It must be funny and so frustrating at the same time.
Absolutely. And while they're doing all this, they're not alone. They're dealing with the whole invasive ecosystem, including the kudzu bugs.
Oh, right. These chunky little sap suckers.
And they're everywhere. The source says when you disturb the vines, these bugs just start pinging off your hard hat like you're in a hailstorm. It's a full-on sensory battle.
And for the really bad areas, the really dense thickets, which the source calls an evil matrix of kudzu and bittersweet and privet shrubs, they use a different technique.
Yeah, for those areas of total domination, they turn something called windowing.
Windowing, what's the goal there?
It's triage. In those super dense spots, you can't do a full removal right away. So the goal is to create a breach, a window of open space between the native canopy high up and the ground below.
And how does that help?
Two things. First, it cuts the vines off from the soil, their primary anchor. But just as important, it lets sunlight get back to the forest floor. You're trying to turn this dark, choked thicket back into a sunny clearing where native seeds might actually have a chance.
You're creating a beachhead for the native plants to fight back.
Exactly. And there's this one anecdote that just perfectly captures the power of these vines.
I think I know the one you mean. The ghost tree.
The ghost tree. The crew cut clean through a nearly foot-thick invasive privet trunk with a chainsaw. They expect it to crash down.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't move an inch. It just hangs there in midair. A ghost tree, held up entirely by the web of vines that had choked it to death. The choking mechanism was so strong it had become its new skeleton.
That's chilling. It just shows the total structural control these vines have. And that brings us to the bigger picture. We need to look at the scale of this problem because the numbers are they're terrifying.
Right. This isn't just a problem in a few national forests. Nearly 20 years ago, the estimate was that invasive plants already covered 133 million acres in the U.S.
133 million acres. To put that in perspective for you, that's roughly the size of California and New York combined.
And that number's just going up. Millions more acres are lost every single year. It's not just an ecological problem, it's an economic one. Billions of dollars in crop losses, in land management costs.
But the ecological cost is what's really devastating. It's this chain reaction that just breaks the whole system.
It's like pulling a block from a Jenga tower. First, the invasives choke out the native plants. When they disappear, the native herbivores and pollinators, they have nothing to eat. They starve.
And when the herbivores go, the carnivores that eat them.
They die out or they move on. And what you're left with is this systematic draining of biodiversity. You replace this rich, complex system with a bland, simple monoculture.
Which leads to this really scary concept that biologists are talking about, the dawning homogocene.
The homogocene. It's the idea that we're entering an era of biological uniformity, where ecosystems all over the world start to look more and more similar because they're all dominated by the same handful of hyper-successful invasive species.
So a forest in North Carolina starts to look disturbingly like a forest in Europe or Asia.
Exactly. You lose all that unique, localized biodiversity that took millennia to evolve. The planet just becomes biologically bland. And this isn't some future prediction. It's happening right now, and it's accelerating.
It's just terrifying. So what makes these plants so good at this? The source calls it an arsenal of botanical superpowers.
They're just masters of survival. They're hyper-fertile, they grow incredibly fast, and they have these specialized weapons like the chemical warfare of the Tree of Heaven or the girdling strength of kudzu. They literally terraform the environment to suit themselves.
And climate change is basically their ally in all of
A
this.
huge ally. The warming climate is removing one of the only natural defenses we had, especially in the southeast. The cold winter freezes used to kill off a lot of these tropical or semi-tropical plants.
But with warmer winters.
They survive year-round. They can just keep pushing north, expanding their territory. The whole process is speeding up.
You know, it's easy to think of these things as like alien invaders, but the source has this really surprising origin story. They're not invaders, they're escape artists.
That is such a crucial point. Every single one of these problem plants was brought here on purpose, mostly during the 18th and 19th centuries, which was this kind of horticultural free-for-all.
So who is bringing them here and why?
It was mostly wealthy enthusiasts, aristocrats, gardeners. They wanted exotic, hardy, fast-growing plants to decorate their estates. They were seen as a status symbol.
Like botanical pets of aristocrats.
Pretty much. Think of the princess tree. It was prized because it grows incredibly fast and has these beautiful purple flowers.
Yeah.
Or porcelain berry, which has these unique metallic-looking berries. They were chosen specifically for the traits that would later make them impossible to contain.
So they escaped the gardens, went feral, and became these ecological nightmares we're dealing with today.
Exactly. We're essentially just trying to clean up a 200-year-old mistake that was driven by aesthetic choices. It completely reframes the whole fight.
Okay, let's shift back to the people who are actually fighting this war on the ground, the ACE crews. The source really highlights the camaraderie that builds when you're doing this kind of work together.
Oh, absolutely. This is vital, hands-on work, and it really depends on the energy of these young people, and their living situation is intense. A big, sprawling crew house in Asheville.
It sounds like a mix of a college dorm, a co-op, and a military barracks. Bunk beds, mismatched sofas.
And a prize collection of Star Trek videotapes. It's an environment that's built for fast, deep bonding. They spend their nights telling these wild stories from the field.
And some of those anecdotes really show you what the job is like. You mentioned Ron Bethea, the project manager, and the turtle.
Yeah, that one's heartbreaking. Ron, who's this legendary figure in ACE, was using a chainsaw on an old log and didn't realize there was a turtle hidden inside.
And he cut it in half.
He did. And the source says he just burst into tears, completely distraught. It shows you how much these crews actually care about the ecosystem they're trying to save.
Just a brutal moment. And then there's the story about the hornet's nest.
The hornet's nest story is just pure chaos comedy. A crew member accidentally peed on a hornet's nest.
Oh, no.
And he just unleashed this swarm on everybody. And you get these two totally different reactions. One guy was fine because he was wearing this huge baggy T-shirt, and the stingers couldn't get to his skin.
And the other one?
The other guy got a wasp down his shirt, and he just stayed completely calm. Just said, "I'm being stung. Ow, I'm being stung," while everyone else was running around.
That kind of shared experience, I can see how that builds a bond.
Yeah,
And it's all managed by Ron Bethea, who seems central to this whole story.
he is. He's 25, a project manager, great cook.
Yeah.
He started as a crew member himself and has done this work in 7 different states. He really brings this sense of mission to it, even compares it to a video game.
Right, like Call of Duty. They have their ammo, their strategies. And he has this great appreciation for the enemy. He says, these plants are smart. They know what they're doing.
It's not just yard work to him. It's a strategic engagement. But we have to talk about the structure of how this all gets paid for, because this is where the socioeconomics get really, really tough.
Right. ACE is basically a contractor for federal agencies. The Park Service, the Forest Service.
They're funded by this patchwork of grants and contracts. And the labor model is basically training young, inexperienced people to be short-term volunteers.
It's crucial field experience if you want a career in conservation. It's what you need on your resume. But the pay, the compensation is where the whole system starts to look really shaky.
It's shocking. For this incredibly difficult, dangerous full-time work, they get room and board and a living allowance of just $240 a week.
Wait, $240 a week? For using chainsaws, handling herbicides, doing backbreaking manual labor, that's less than minimum wage.
It's a staggering gap between the intensity of the work and the pay. They do get an education award at the end that can go toward tuition or student loans, but the actual take-home pay is, well, it's not sustainable.
Which brings us to the core problem. You need this field experience to get a full-time job, but the experience itself is so poorly paid that it creates this massive barrier to entry.
It absolutely does. It forces young people to work second jobs, drain their savings, rely on their parents. The system basically favors people who are already financially secure.
And Ron Nebatha, this ACE legend leading missions across the country, he's the perfect example of this dilemma. He wants to go back to school, but he can't. He's trapped by debt.
His quote just hits so hard. He says, "I need to get on that train, but I am in debt too bad. I just need to breathe for a minute."
Here's this dedicated, experienced leader who can't advance his own career because the essential training period pays so little.
And that's creating a huge systemic problem. The source makes it clear that ACE's biggest challenge isn't finding projects to fund. It's finding enough people who are willing and able to do the work for that level of pay.
So the entire national conservation effort is being held back not by a lack of work to do, but by the financial inaccessibility of the job itself.
Right. And the ACE leadership knows this is an existential threat. They're pushing in D.C. to replace this volunteer, low-pay model with a properly paid conservation workforce.
Ron figures that just $15 an hour plus benefits would change ACE entirely.
It would. It would turn it from a short-term sacrifice into a viable entry-level job. It would open the door for so many more committed young people.
But when you look at the federal funding, the political will just doesn't seem to be there. President Biden's infrastructure bill only set aside about $250 million for invasive plant elimination.
$250 million. Now compare that to the 133 million acres already infested and the billions of dollars in damage done every year.
It's a drop in the bucket. It's a profound lack of prioritization.
It really is. And it underscores this big philosophical debate that's happening among ecologists. Given the overwhelming scale and the minimal funding, is all this painstaking one tree at a time work even worth it? Or should we just sit back?
So there's actually a school of thought that says we should just let nature take its course.
There is. The long-term evolutionary view is that, given enough time, decades, centuries, the invasives will become less dominant. Native species will evolve defenses. Evolution will sort it out.
But the people on the front lines, like Juice Bazine, AC's Eastern director, they argue that the short term matters a lot.
He says that long might be longer than we can afford to wait. The timeline of evolution isn't our timeline. And in the short term, the timescale we live in, these invasives can completely decimate the carrying capacity of an ecosystem.
You can't wait for evolution if the species you're trying to save goes extinct next year.
Exactly. So intervention, as painful and underfunded as it is necessary to stop a total collapse. The reality today is this constant physical fight waged by young, underpaid people with hatchets and herbicide, one plant at a time.
And because of the limited resources, they have to practice this ruthless triage. They have to pick the small battles they think they can win.
Right. The goal is just to keep the native plants in the game for one more year, to create those little windows of sunlight until they can come back next year for the next skirmish.
But the truth is, it's a fight that's never one and done. And on the whole, the invasives are gaining ground.
They are. And once you learn the language of this invasion, you start seeing it everywhere. Kudzu in city parks, garlic mustard behind the taco shop. It's woven into our modern landscape.
It's easy to feel surrounded, and the source ends with this image that just perfectly captures that feeling of being overwhelmed.
It does. The crew is driving out of the forest after a long day, completely exhausted, and they see this massive bank of bittersweet on the roadside.
It's already choking a telephone pole, and it's on its way up to the wires.
Just this massive, untouched monster tower of an invasive plant. And they're tired, they're off the clock, they know they can't stop it.
And their reaction is just so human. Don't look. They just cover their eyes. They can't even stand to look at the defeat that's right outside their window.
And that bittersweet on the pole is a symbol of the entire problem. The source makes it clear that our national solution right now relies on this low-paid, temporary labor model. So if the U.S. keeps depending on young people to sacrifice their financial futures to do this work, we have to ask you, What is the true long-term cost? It's not just dollars. It's the number of experienced conservation professionals like Ron who are being driven out of the field because the career path is just financially impossible. So how quickly will we reach the point where only those massive, untouched monster towers remain? This is a struggle that's playing out not just in remote forests, but maybe, right now, in your own backyard. That is a thought worth deeply considering.
That's a powerful way to end it. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll be back next time with another topic worth the dive.